and we're gonna start. So maybe some of you are at home right now watching me at the same time that you're watching CNN and trying to get a little bit of zen in the middle of all this. Maybe you're watching me later after you've taken a breath. The talk for tonight is called 1% Power, which is an interesting title, and it means probably not quite what you're thinking, but maybe exactly what you're thinking. So, I got the idea for this from what's going on in the country today, and the last week is the election. And I have this conversation with people every year. I love voting. I like paying attention to politics. It's interesting to me. I've had conversations with multiple friends, like good friends of mine, who are just like, I don't care about voting. It's pointless. Well, I get that it's not the most exciting thing in the world to most people, and that's fine. And a lot of people just think like it's pointless to even try to vote because there's so many people and my vote's not going to count, and well, I live in California and it always goes Democrat, or I live wherever. Yeah, all that's true, and I always like to ask myself, well, what if everybody else in the world, felt the same way and acted the same way as you are in this situation right now? Well then, I guess nobody would vote and we'd have no politics, and that'd probably be way better. But I was thinking about this idea of taking whatever responsibility there is for us to take. And I gave a talk a little while ago, or I at least wrote a newsletter about the idea of responsibility. And responsibility is huge, and the main problem that I think people have with responsibility is that we have a tendency to blame each other, and we blame each other entirely for the problems that we have. And we like to avoid blame completely and heap it all on other people because it's just much more convenient that way. If I have no responsibility, then when things go wrong, it's not my fault, and I can feel totally fine about it. There are many problems with that, not the least of which being it's just not true. So in pretty much any situation in life that we will encounter, and there are some that are very obvious and some that are more subtle, but we always have some part of the responsibility, and we always have some power in every situation. Even in voting, there are millions and millions of people. I don't even know, it was 150, 160 million people voting in the country. What's my one vote gonna matter? Maybe not that much, but it matters something, right? There is an actual quantifiable impact that it has. It's super tiny, quantifiable, but it exists, and that's more real than a lot of people give it credit for. And then there's everything else that can go along with it. I'm campaigning. I'm going, when there's not a pandemic, I'm going door to door. Or I'm writing postcards or whatever. And I did some of that stuff this year, and some of it I didn't. But I'll say, when you look at like the numbers that are coming down in this election, everything is super close. I mean, it's ridiculously close, and it's absolutely it is absolutely true and obvious in a lot of situations how a vote or a little bit of effort that you might put into having conversations with people would have mattered. And some people are probably kicking themselves right now, thinking like, I could have made a bigger difference. Okay. But when we are talking about, so that's a super tiny example as far as the percentage of your power that you would take and that you could impact a presidential election. It's far lower than 1%, right? Some people might have more than that, but very few people. And we can look at the other end of the spectrum, like in our relationships. And maybe you're having an argument with somebody, or there's something that's going on in a relationship where that is, boy, I mean, we love blaming our significant others. We love blaming anybody who we have any kind of relationship for things, if we're close to them at all, because we just figure like, well, they'll take it and they'll still like me after. But we kind of have this very black and white, like lopsided view of it, where we heap all of this blame onto the other person, and we take none of the blame for ourselves. Where that's just not true. There's always some part of the responsibility that we want to take, or we have no power at all. So in a relationship, let's say it's roughly 50-50, a lot of people don't treat it that way. They treat it like everything is the other person's fault 100%. And of course we're going to argue. And of course, if you have that viewpoint, then everything is going to make you feel like a victim. You're always going to feel like, the other person is really screwing you over, and how could you treat me that way? When we don't recognize the responsibility and the power that we do have in the relationship, and every argument, every conversation that we have. So even you could say, the dishes. You're not cleaning the dishes. And every time I come over here, you left your dirty dishes in there. And then she says, yeah, but last Tuesday, you left the dishes in the sink. And then I would say, yeah, but you do it all of the other times. And sure, we could argue about who does it more or whatever, who has more of the blame. But at the end of the day, if we don't take responsibility for our part of it, even if it's as low as 1%, then do we really have the standing to tell somebody else that they're all wrong, or to think of the situation as being that way? No, obviously not. And I wrote about this in my blog in politics. They call this whataboutism, and it's something that I'm sure goes beyond politics. But rather than accepting responsibility, accepting any part of the blame, or recognizing that we have power, we like to say, when somebody blames us for something, we like to say, oh yeah, well what about when you did this? And it's like a fight to see who is worse of a person. In politics, this is all over the place. This is, as I mentioned in the article, when I Wikipedia'd whataboutism, they said that this kind of got its start in Russian propaganda and Soviet propaganda, and it has really started to just become a huge part of our own political discourse. And way before that, I'm sure, the first couple that ever existed, the caveman was complaining to the cave woman, like, why'd you leave your meat uncooked in the fireplace? I don't know. And she was, well, because you did it last time. It's just a very human thing, unfortunately, and doesn't need to be. When we recognize and we take that power, even if it's just 1% power, there is a totally different experience that we have, rather than feeling like victims. And of course there is such a thing as being a victim, and in some situations we really need to recognize that and take real steps to help victims, help ourselves, help other people. But if we are always the victim and we are never taking any power or any responsibility, that is a very small existence, a very bleak kind of outlook towards life. It's like I've got no power over anything. And the last time I talked about this, I talked about the difference between power and control. Because human beings, we love to control things, and we love to know exactly how things are going to go. And the reality is that we're never going to know exactly how things are going to go. We're never going to have complete control over anything. But we can have power, we can recognize that, and we can exercise power, which is more like we are affecting things, or maybe pushing things in one direction without completely controlling it. And we want to do this in martial arts. There's a very big difference between I'm grappling with somebody and I just hold on to them as tight as I possibly can, using all of my force and all of my strength so that they can't possibly move. That's not really grappling. That's just like one person's stronger than the other person and they just hold them as tight as they can and then nothing happens. And that's not very interesting or exciting. And control in life, imagine if we actually could control everything in life. It would be really boring. We would know exactly what was going to happen and there would be no surprises, and at the end of it we'd look back and say like, yep, that stuff all happened. But power is a little bit more exciting, right? Because we don't actually know what's going to happen, and we can still exercise that power and affect things, and control feels more like an all or nothing thing, but power, it can feel like, okay, I don't have complete power over this because I don't have complete control, but I have a little piece. And so maybe I'm just kind of pushing this, just nudging it in the direction that I'm trying to nudge it without knowing exactly the way that things are going to end up. So this is the same thing as the difference between attachment and commitment, right? And we're attached to things going a very specific way, and they don't go exactly the way that we want them to. That is just devastating for us. And some of us can look at the results of this election and think, even though, you know, there's some good swinging in the direction that some of us were hoping, it's not nearly the way that we thought it was going to go. And man, I'll be honest, it's been quite depressing for me. And had a couple of sleepless nights, and I think stressed myself right into some kind of a stomach issue. I'm operating at approximately 1% power right now. I have been sick all day long, and have just mustered the amount of power necessary to come in here and do this talk. I did not teach a single other class. And if you've ever been sick, you've had the same kind of experience where it's like you feel like you have no power at all. And sometimes you're just thinking, somebody just end it now. Like, I don't want to spend another second feeling like this. And we still got to recognize that as weak as we are sometimes, as enfeebled as we might feel, we still have some power. I had enough to walk, down the street to the dojo, open the door, plug in the phones, and start talking. And at the end of this, I'll probably just go to sleep. But when we recognize that we have power, that is energizing. That is invigorating. And this is really what it all comes down to, is our outlook, our attitude, our energy level. Because if we look at things like we have no power and there's nothing that we can do about it, that drains our energy and that makes our experience, again, very small, and we don't feel good about anything. But if we are able to focus on the power that we do have, even if it's tiny, even if it's 1%, even if it's 0.000001%, if that's what we're focusing on, and I'm like, I know I'm not going to swing this whole country the way that I want it to go. I know that I'm not going to, cure the COVID, and I'm not going to stop global warming and, do whatever. I'm going to do what I can do. And if that's, writing 100 postcards, or if that's posting something that nobody will read on Facebook, or whatever it is that I can do, when we are living in that, experiencing that power, connecting to that power, it is a very different experience of life. And I will say that if we're unable to do that, and we're only unable to see where we are powerless, and that's what we're always connecting to, is where we are powerless, the 99% sometimes, then we're not going to do anything. We won't exercise the 1% of power that we do have. So in our practice, there are lots of examples of this. When you are grappling with somebody, for example, you'll recognize that there's some tension there. Somebody is using muscle, and you might swear that it's not you. You're positive that it's all the other person, or at least they started it, right? I'm using some muscle, but it's only in response to what the other person did. If we point the blame and put it completely on the other person's shoulders, then we have no power to change what we're doing. And when we're powerless, for example, when we're grappling to decide how much muscle we're using, then we're going to have a very difficult time working on our technique. We're not going to enjoy our practice very much, and it's not the kind of experience that we want, right? So there may actually be times where we're grappling with somebody and it's clearly just them using a ton of power. Well, we can talk to them about it. We can do what we can do, and we can recognize that, well, maybe this one's not going my way, and next time I will make whatever adjustments I need to make. But when we get into the mindset of, well, this person's using lots of strength and there's nothing I can do about this, even if there is just a tiny sliver of a chance, of a hope, of a dream, of a whiff of an escape or a submission or whatever, we can't see it. It's impossible for us to see it if we're just focusing on how we're powerless, right? And you guys have all had this experience if you're grappling with somebody who's bigger. They're really grinding you down on the mat. They've got their weight perfectly distributed on you, and you're like trying to oompa, and you go to oompa, and you go, nothing's happening. And you try it three or four times, and then you just stop. You're like, well, I guess this is it. This is where it all ends for me. I give up completely. And you may have just been a moment away from seeing the other way out. Maybe it's not an oompa that I need to do. Maybe I need to roll to my side. Maybe I just need to frame into my partner, whatever it is. The thing is that there are always actually thousands of options if we are present to see them, if we have the mindset that allows us to be creative and to flow in the moment and to be able to take that power when we can get it, even if it's just a tiny sliver. So we want to recognize that and play with that in practice and really practice recognizing when we do have power. This might happen in many different situations in partner work. You're sparring with somebody, you're practicing chin-off, sticky hands, you're doing push hands and Tai Chi, whatever it is, and you recognize your mind going into that place of blame. And you recognize your mind going into that place of powerlessness. And you're taking away all of your power and all of your options, and you're just saying, I can't do anything right now. This is it. Recognize that as soon as you possibly can, and then flip it. I mean, you're looking at all of this 99% that you can't do anything about, and this 1% down here is buried. You got to flip it on its head and just pay attention to this 1%. And it might not work out, but at least you are practicing getting your mind in that mindset. You've got a totally different paradigm. It's a real paradigm shift where we are able to focus on that part, that tiny piece that we do have power over. And then, even if it only happens 1 in 100 times, you'll pull something out and you'll have that evidence that shows you, okay, I can actually do something with this. And the more of that evidence that you build up for yourself in your practice and in your life, the more you will start to go there automatically. We'll start to focus on that power wherever we have it. And then we'll start to take that out into everything else in life, in our relationships. When we recognize ourselves going right into blame mindset, we say, wait a minute. This is me focusing on the part that I don't have power over. Let me flip this and focus on what I do have power over. And maybe that means that I need to take care of the things that I'm doing wrong first in the relationship before I start bickering at the other person. Or maybe it's just a totally different way of entering into that conversation with the other person. As soon as we realize that they're probably on the other end doing the same thing to us, and don't blame somebody else for blaming you, because that is going to put you into an endless feedback loop, which will just be the end of the world. But practice that. Practice recognizing it in the same way that we do in meditation. We recognize where our mind goes as soon as possible and bring it back to where we want it to go, where we want it to be. And when you're sitting and meditating, for example, maybe you will be sitting there and the car driving by will honk its horn. And you'll say, like, well, of course my meditation is ruined because that stupid car honked its horn. Or you could be like, there were 100 of us on retreat years ago, meditating, having this perfectly nice, beautiful meditation on the beach in Michigan, and just like out of nowhere, rain just started pouring on us. And it was cold, and it was very difficult to meditate, and I know, because I was having these thoughts, that probably most other people were having the same thoughts, like, this sucks. Who ordered this weather? How am I supposed to meditate with this? All I can focus on is the rain falling on my head and soaking me, and how long are we going to do this for anyways? When is Sifu finally going to let us stop meditating so I can go back and change my clothes and whatever? Well, that's not a very good meditation. If that's all you're focusing on is how things are going poorly, it's never going to be good. So, some people, and I can't remember if I was able to do that with this specific meditation that I'm talking about or not, but some people I know had this kind of internal conversation, and they arrived at like, well, I'm just going to do this to the best of my ability. I'm going to take this meditation for what it's worth and enjoy it as much as I can. And if you have been able to do that in your practice, you've noticed that our practice is filled with opportunities for us to recognize the hardships that we are going through and either cause ourselves to suffer because of it, or flip it on its head and say like, yeah, this is an even more awesome meditation because it's freezing rain, I'm soaked to the bone, and I sat there anyways, and I was able to go back to my breath. And of course, that's all ego on some level, but we want to at least practice that kind of mindset. Now, if we are able to actually, this would be the final step in meditation that would solve all of our problems in the world, is if we're able to actually just transcend and let go of the ego, well, then there's no blame happening there at all. Right? Because blame can only happen from the ego. It can only happen when we are viewing ourselves as being separate from everybody else. Because without that separation, there's no blame, because there's no you versus me. It's just like what's happening, and we're all here on this glorious bumpy ride together. And the thought of blame doesn't even enter into it. All we see is opportunity and power. So I would love for you to get into that place with meditation tonight. Go for it. Just recognize whatever kinds of thoughts are heading in or coming into your head, and just let them go immediately. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But let's recognize that at least on a philosophical level, it is possible for us to experience that state where we are completely free of blame for ourselves and for other people. All that there is this moment, this experience, this connection between ourselves and other people and all of it, the universe. No separation, no blame. It doesn't actually matter who's got more power, who has less power. It's all just power and energy that we are sharing together. So let's go for it. When you sit tonight, feel that. Allow yourself to actually feel. Of course, if you start to have a thought of blame, something is interrupting you, or you're remembering something that you have to get done, just let it go. Let it go immediately and smoothly, and come right back to this moment. And this breath is the key to unlocking that experience. This breath right now, because in that breath there's no blame, there is no separation, there is no powerlessness. It is just the perfect experience of the moment, and it should fill our consciousness, our awareness completely, and leave no room for any of that nonsense. So sit comfortably.